They were supposed to be untouchable, the cowboy and the pop icon, two worlds crashing together and somehow working. Every red carpet smile, every playful TikTok, every interview made it look effortless, like they had cracked the code. But what if the smiles weren't the full story? Because behind the carefully curated moments, there's growing buzz that something far more complicated was happening. Not a scandal, not an affair, something quieter, and honestly, more unsettling. It allegedly started with a private message, not sent in anger, not sent in betrayal, sent in frustration. And it didn't go to a stranger. It went to someone trusted, someone close, someone who understood both sides of the spotlight. And buried inside that message was a line people say changed everything. A line that wasn't about love fading, but about identity slipping away, about feeling lost inside a life that no longer felt real. This isn't a cheating story. It's a story about pressure, silence, and what happens when someone stops recognizing the world they helped build. And once that line was crossed, there was no going back.
On the surface, their differences looked charming, almost poetic. Blake has always been rooted in quiet spaces, dirt roads, early mornings, and a life that doesn't need an audience. He's never hidden the fact that Hollywood drains him. The noise, the cameras, the constant performance. It's never been his world. Gwen's world is the opposite. Reinvention is survival. New eras, new sounds, new visuals. Staying visible isn't vanity. It's how you stay alive in pop music. To her, evolution means strength. And this gap didn't open overnight. It widened slowly. One schedule at a time, one career move at a time. One moment where they realized they were recharging in completely different ways. This wasn't about arguments or ultimatums. It was quieter than that. Two people growing in directions that made sense individually, but felt harder to reconcile together. And that silent distance, that's usually where the real trouble starts.
That's where Kelly enters the picture, and not in the way people jump to assume. Blake and Kelly have years of history sitting side by side, navigating the same industry pressures, the same fake smiles, the same nonstop expectations. They've complained about the same nonsense, laughed at the same absurdities, and survived the same machine. That kind of shared experience builds emotional familiarity. It creates a space where you don't have to explain yourself. You can just talk. And that's the key difference here. This wasn't about romance. It was about venting, about unloading thoughts you don't feel safe saying at home because you're afraid they'll explode into something bigger. But that's also where things get dangerous. When emotional weight gets redirected outside a marriage, even innocently, it creates a quiet shift. The person listening becomes the safe place, the place where honesty lives. And once that happens, the lines don't need to be crossed for damage to be done.
According to Online Buzz, this is where everything quietly shifted. Reports claim Blake sent a message that wasn't meant to start a fire, just to release pressure. Not a rant, not an attack, more like a confession he didn't know how to say out loud. The message wasn't really about music or schedules or fame. It was about feeling disconnected from his own life, about missing what felt real to him. The quiet, the simplicity, the version of himself that didn't feel staged. What shook people wasn't the tone, but the meaning behind it, the sense that he no longer recognized the marriage he was living in, not because love was gone, but because the world around it had changed so much that it didn't feel like home anymore. And that's what made it so heavy. It wasn't blame, it was loss. The kind that sneaks up on you when you realize you're still standing there, but the life you signed up for has slowly drifted somewhere else.
What reportedly happened next is where trust began to fracture. Not with shouting, not with a dramatic confrontation, but with realization, the kind that settles in your chest before you even know how to react. By the time the message came to light, the damage was already done. This wasn't just about what was said, it was about who it was said to. Learning that your partner shared private doubts with someone else doesn't spark instant rage. It brings humiliation.
That quiet feeling of being the last person to know what's really going on in your own marriage. And suddenly, Kelly is no longer just a friend caught in the middle. She becomes part of the moment, not by intention, but by proximity, a trusted third party who now holds words that were never meant to leave the circle. No one set out to betray anyone, but intimacy had already been redirected. And once that realization hits, the relationship doesn't break loudly, it breaks inward.
After that, things didn't explode. They shifted. And that shift was impossible to miss. Reports suggest the dynamic between all three quietly changed. Conversations felt shorter. Friendships felt strained. The easy, playful energy people were used to just wasn't there anymore. In public, the signs were subtle but telling. Less eye contact, more physical distance, smiles that showed up but didn't stay. Fans noticed, and once people sense something's off, speculation fills the silence fast. Kelly, meanwhile, was reportedly stuck in the worst position imaginable, trying to reassure one side without betraying the other, playing peacemaker in a situation she never asked to be part of, carrying emotional weight that didn't belong to her. And as the tension lingered, the quiet moments spoke louder than any statement ever could, because when words disappear, body language becomes the headline.
According to reports, what followed wasn't panic, and it wasn't denial either. That's what made it sting so deeply. Instead of scrambling to smooth things over, the response allegedly cut straight to the truth that had been sitting there for a long time. The message wasn't softened, it wasn't walked back. It carried the weight of something closer to, maybe it's time we stop pretending. Not pretending the lifestyle works, not pretending the disconnect isn't real. What hurt the most wasn't anger, it was meaning. The idea of feeling like a prop in your own marriage, like you're present but only to complete the picture, smiling for the brand, showing up for appearances. That's the moment things reportedly crossed a line, because once someone admits they feel invisible inside a relationship, you can't unhear it. You can't reframe it, and you can't go back to how things were before those words existed.
At this point, the situation isn't about who's right or wrong. It's about two lives pulling in different directions. One grounded in routine, privacy, and space to breathe. The other built on reinvention, visibility, and momentum. Farm versus spotlight. Stability versus constant evolution. Neither of those desires is wrong, they just don't always coexist easily. And this is where Kelly's concern reportedly deepened. Having lived through her own very public heartbreak, she recognizes the signs. Not anger, but emotional separation. The moment when two people stop fighting because they're no longer standing in the same place. She isn't afraid of drama, she's afraid of silence. Because silence usually means decisions are being made internally, without discussion. That's the real crossroads. Not a breakup or a headline, but a quiet question hanging in the air. Can two people who want different versions of life still choose each other? When you step back from the rumors, the texts, and the speculation, this isn't about villains. It's about people whose lives and desires don't perfectly align. Emotional honesty clashes with lifestyle choices. What feels real to one can feel foreign to the other. That's the tension. Not betrayal, not malice, just incompatibility. It's a reminder that love isn't always enough. Even deep connection and shared history can struggle against different priorities and visions for life. Sometimes caring for someone deeply means realizing your paths aren't identical. So where does that leave us? Is Blake simply holding on to the life he knows, or is Gwen chasing a necessary evolution? And what about Kelly, caught in the middle, trying to mediate? There's no easy answer, but we want to hear yours. Team country or team pop? Or maybe, in this story, no one is really wrong at all.